Welcome to Ashley on CBD, your one-stop podcast where we drop the truth on all things CBD and maybe some pop culture too. Stick around as we delve deep into the practical health benefits of CBD for you.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for listening. Today's episode, as always, is brought to you by Magic Immuna Tea, available at packedwithlife.com. What could be more important in today's world than having a strong immune system? Probably nothing. But how do you do that? Diet, exercise? Well, no kidding. But what I've recently started doing is drinking Magic Immuna Tea. Number one, it tastes great, and it's loaded with healthy nutrients called adaptogens, including 4 essential mushrooms, reishi, lion's mane, chaga, and cordyceps. No, not the magic kind, you guys. Come on. Reishi, lion's mane, chaga, and cordyceps are great for you. Highly nutritious and very adept at boosting your immune system. So give Magic Immuna Tea a try at packedwithlife.com. Today's episode features Laura Lagano, who's a registered dietitian and attended the Institute of Functional Medicine. She's focused on nutrition and its overall impact on wellness and health, involved in personal life coaching in order to help people factor in nutrition as well as other health and wellness techniques to achieve their maximum, most beneficial life. She wrote a book called The CBD Oil Miracle, which we'll talk about. And she also is running something called the Holistic Cannabis Academy, providing online education for folks that are wishing to learn more about cannabis and its healthy benefits. So hope you enjoyed the show today. Thank you. Hello, Laura.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Where am I finding you today?
I am in my camera seems so close. I'm in my house in Hoboken, New Jersey.
Okay.
How about you?
I'm in my basement in Boulder, Colorado.
Okay. Nice.
So, well, thank you so much for joining.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
I'm so excited about this conversation.
Oh, this is one of my favorite conversations to have.
Well, the whole idea of factoring in diet into the conversation is what's got me excited, right? It's CBD plays a role, and I'm sure we'll get into all of this. But given your background and as a registered dietitian, and I think if I'm saying it right, the Institute of Functional Medicine certification on top of that, right? So.
Well, I don't have the certification. I did all the coursework, okay. And I filed my case study, and I never took the exam. I haven't taken an exam since 1991. So yeah. I'm like, what do I need that
I understand.
For?
Yeah, I would stay away from that myself.
Yeah.
Anyway, so thank you so much for being here. I mean, it's what the objective of what we're trying to do on this program is to really educate and broaden the awareness of what CBD, what cannabis can do for people in various different walks of life and different things that people are looking for. And okay. Really in hopes of educating, broadening the awareness and demystifying the whole thing by talking to people that know what they're talking about, like yourself. So that's it. And, I'd love to just know a little bit about your background as we get started. Sure. And then we can kind of go into more in depth as we kind of see how things go.
Sure. So I have been a nutritionist for a long time. That's what I studied in school. I became initially very interested in nutrition in my mother's kitchen in Brooklyn. They used to listen to a New York station, and it was talk radio. And it was talk radio that had all sorts of different people on it. And Adele Davis was was a guest often, as well as Dr. Feingold, Ben Feingold. And if you've heard about the Feingold diet, he came out with this many, many years ago. He's long since passed away, about removing artificial ingredients and certain types of sugars and salicylates from the diet because he felt they contributed to hyperactivity. Well, he was way before his time. He got completely poo-pooed. And then, of course, several years ago, people were studying, artificial ingredients and salicylates and found, yes, it did contribute to hyperactivity. And it's now, it's a standard, at least in my world, in nutrition and in functional medicine, to remove artificial ingredients. And of course, the question that I have to ask, that I'm sure you'd agree with, is why do we even need artificial colors in our food? Why do we need artificial flavors when nature provides all of these things already? And, you see the big cereal manufacturers have taken out, many of them have taken out food coloring out of their products. I mean, it's taken a long time, but nevertheless, of course, that's driven by, what the consumers are asking for.
Well, I think you're being generous calling them food products.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Totally. That's absolutely true. But somehow, that seemed, one of my girlfriends, she was telling this funny story once, how her mother would say, on Easter, when they were hunting, for Easter eggs, she came from a big family, and her mom would say, wait a minute, you have to have breakfast first. And my girlfriend said, what, a breakfast of sugar, artificially flavored and colored cereal? The chocolate was a better choice. Mm-hmm. So, we think about, what has happened to, our food ways. And of course, in nutrition, we refer to that as the standard American diet, better known as SAD, which is full of processed foods. But I stayed true to nutrition. I mean, after all these years, it's still my love. I always love learning about nutrition, and I really love using food as medicine. And what brought me my journey along the way to cannabis really was my daughter. And my daughter, who's now 24, was my best teacher, and she became my teacher, of course, as all our children do, but hers was pretty powerful because she was having grand mal seizures and, a lot of developmental issues. And so I used food and nutrition early on to really help her. And that is what stopped her seizures, So she was on, modified ketogenic food plan. And there were times that, and in fact, one of those times is right now, where she doesn't eat foods with salicylates. So, thank you, Dr. Ben Feingold. But, so but it changes all the time. People think like once you get a food plan, like that's it for life. No, it does not only changes during the life cycle, it changes maybe at different seasons or what else is going on in your life. Certainly, we all know now during the pandemic that what you were eating when you were active and outside of your home should be different than what you're eating inside of the home. But of course, many of us reach for those processed foods. And that's why, there's been weight gain and more inflammatory issues during the pandemic. But getting back to my daughter, then she is, of course, what brought me to cannabis and hemp-derived CBD. Obviously, I knew the story about, Charlotte Fiji, who sadly has passed away, and her great success in using a hemp-derived CBD product. And, she had Dravet syndrome, which was many, many more seizures than what my daughter had. And, I knew that CBD was great for quelling anxiety, but what I didn't expect some of the other things that happened with my daughter, which namely had to do with her language ability and her processing. So I do think that CBD can be miraculous. I think the plant in and of itself is miraculous, and it's I'm sure you would agree, it's pretty devastating that this has been kept from us for so many years. This should be in everybody's toolbox, practitioners, but also, in your at-home toolbox for your family. It's a plant.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I think a big, I wonder what's your opinion on this is, one of the things I've always hypothesized is that cannabis was always in our diets as humans in some way, shape, or form throughout the years. And then it was, all of a sudden kind of taken out of our diets intentionally for political reasons and monopolistic, capitalism reasons. I stress the monopolistic dimension of that because I'm very much pro-capitalism, but monopolies should not be allowed, right? And that's what kind of happened. But neither here nor there. The point I was making is that now, it's not in the diets of most people, right? And we're experiencing a lot more chemicals in our diets. We also had more organic diets through the years because it was, food was organic. You didn't have to call it organic because it was.
Totally.
Right. And so nowadays you have a kind of a confluence of both of those situations where people are not eating real food and they're, they're missing the cannabinoids from their diet, which we now know, at least that we make cannabinoids. So therefore there's a system to process them. So anyway, my question for you is what's your reaction to that? And am I beating around the right bush there with that hypothesis?
Well, I think, to answer or build on, your comment about organic diets, there's no question about that. I mean, I can remember even growing up when there certainly were a lot of processed foods available. But I think because I grew up in a household with immigrants, they weren't as quick to, for the standard American diet. They were, everything was fresh. And when I visit my relatives in a very little tiny town in Italy called Laudito, I mean, you're talking like a medieval town with 750 people where most of them are my cousins. They call organic biologic, but they don't really even talk about it because it's like what you said, that's what it already is. Right. That's just what it is. They don't have to be so careful as to selecting things. But you're absolutely right. Because we have all these, it's like the cannabinoids and a lot of the, the organic products have been sort of pushed out of our diet in favor of processed foods. And, some people suffer more than others. Right. I mean, we all know people.
We're not all the same.
No, we all know people who eat really badly, who make a lot of bad choices and they seem really well, right? Mm-hmm. And then we know people who, seem to follow, the rules and the guidelines and maybe they don't do as well. But this also goes back to genetics. We all have a genetic predisposition. And some of us are able to detoxify better. So if we take something, everybody can relate to this. Let's just take caffeine, a psychoactive, and some of us can really are quick caffeine metabolizers, right? So you can have a coffee at 11:55 and be asleep at midnight. But other people, if they have a coffee past even noon, they're going to have problems falling asleep because they're a much slower caffeine metabolizer. And most people know this. Right. Sure. They're in touch with that. Even if you look at alcohol, people know that. And I always like to point out that, as a group, as an ethnic group, the Irish, people think, they drink too much. They actually, I don't know if they drink too much. They don't have a lot of alcohol dehydrogenase. So as a group, as an ethnic group, the Irish do not have the enzyme to break down alcohol. The Germans have a lot of it. So, I think that, of course, we live in the United States where very few of us are one ethnicity. We're mutts. So, mm-hmm. You never know, even though, yes, my mother's family is Italian, I am a very bad caffeine metabolizer. So, there goes, I didn't get that gene.
Right. Yeah, I didn't either, but that's a whole nother conversation with regards to caffeine. So tell me, I guess I'm interested in a lot of different things as I was reading your background, but you do a lot of PLC or personal life coaching, right? Talk to me about that. I'm always intrigued with
Sure
self-improvement.
So Jeff Bland coined the term personalized lifestyle medicine. So that's really taking, instead of giving somebody a medication, you know how when people go to the doctor, they think they've scored if they get the little piece of paper, right, with the prescription on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that prescription, right. And then that prescription leads to another prescription because they have to mitigate the side effect of the prescription. And before you know it, you have 3 prescriptions. This is actually what happened to my daughter. So when my daughter was very young, and, you know, it's when you have a child who's having seizures or who's sick, it really doesn't matter what your background is. You're too freaked out and you want somebody else to take care of your child. And then when my daughter was she was 4, she was on 3 medications. And of course, all of these medications, or at least 2 of them, were definitely meant for adults. And nobody did any studies to determine what's the effect of those 3 medications together. But things were not working out. You know, yes, her seizures had stopped, but she was nuts. I mean, literally nuts. I couldn't even leave the house with her. And she has a twin brother and an older daughter and an older sister. So it was the problem. And I realized, wait a minute, this is not good. I really have to take matters into my own hands. And so when you talk about, you know, personalized lifestyle medicine or anything to do with lifestyle, you're then personalizing that for the individual. You know, what is it that person needs? And obviously I needed to make sure that her seizures weren't going to rear their ugly head when I took her off the medication, but that we were also going to see her personality. So it was like a big aha moment for me in looking at not only taking, you know, the artificial colors and all of that out of her diet, which of course she didn't have at that time anyway, but then what could I add? So, you know, so what could you add in? So it's looking at, you know, not just the food people eat and maybe supplements, which is, you know, and hemp-derived CBD in my book comes under supplement, even though I know the FDA is not really sure what's happening with that. But to me, it's really a nutraceutical. And as you said, a food, but also looking at other, you know, many other lifestyle habits. And interestingly enough, you know, so we're talking about movement. I don't like to use the word exercise because it freaks people out a lot. You know, they don't want to go to the gym. They don't want to participate in team sports. So it could be any type of movement. You know, movement, breathing exercises, tapping, meditation, yoga, anything that's meditative. So I know people think meditation, you got to have that special pillow. Okay. Knitting is meditative. Every religion has some kind of a bead, like in Rome, in Catholicism, there's the rosary. Mm-hmm. You're saying that rosary over and over again, it's meditative. But knitting, you know, think of crocheting, anything. My daughter, Isabella, actually does needlepoint. And, you know, I wish everybody could see it, but it's really beautiful. You know, she does it. It's not following a pattern, but it's very, very repetitive. And for her, it's very meditative and it's very grounding. And I think we've sort of lost those things. You know, we used to, now I don't consider scrolling to be meditative. That would be the opposite of meditative, especially if you're doing that doom scrolling. All of these things actually impact the endocannabinoid system because they're now going to have like the same effect as a hug, you know, which sadly we don't have a lot of hugs right now during the pandemic, where it works like as a psychoactive and really can help to regulate that endocannabinoid system.
Interesting. So I guess what you're saying there is your toolkit is wide open, right? So whatever anybody's really looking for with regards to, or actually even what they need, basically, after you talk to them, you kind of think about it and talk to them to figure out what the right combination of everything might be for that individual.
Right. And where they're ready to start with. You know, if somebody is, you know, eating fast food, obviously I am not going to, you know, to have them
got a long way to go. Right.
Yeah. You know, and you have to start people from where they're also, some people are ready to go from 0 to 60. But most people are not. And you have to sort of bring them in. So generally, what I do is even things like cleaning products. They're very toxic. We always want to be working with lowering our toxic load. And, we generally, for the most part, we can't change the air we breathe. I mean, we can be using essential oils in our homes in a diffuser, but you live in the house you live in. You're not going to, no, not everybody is moving to the country or living in the woods. So we can do little things. And so most people are totally okay with changing their cleaning products, for instance, which can be very toxic, or making their own cleaning products, and even changing personal products, shampoos, soaps. I mean, so many of these things are very toxic. And I just send people over to ewg.org, Environmental Working Group, where you can look at those ratings. You can put in your product name.
My wife's a big fan of that website.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And they also have information on the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15, which has to do with produce. So, people are shocked to learn, strawberries, apples are always very high up there as like the dirtiest fruits with the most pesticides. So, rather than telling people you have to buy everything organic, which for some people the prices can be too astronomical, or they can't find the products. So, you just focus on certain things. You want to try to get as much animal products organic as possible, because remember, animals have fat and the toxins are stored in the fat. It's very easy to find organic eggs. A lot of, and, so you start with, with a few things at a time. Now, if people want to do it, they can also do some genetic testing to see, where they fit in. So yes, most of us know about our ability to metabolize caffeine and alcohol, but a lot of other things we really don't know. Now, I might be able to take a guess because, just empirically, but that can be helpful for people.
Well, I remember what, I didn't always have the best diet, when I was growing up and even into my early adulthood. I didn't really value it. I didn't pay attention to it really. And I remember when I ended up getting together with my wife, and then we went on to get married, but she started persuading me with the organic diet based on, hey, I bet you'll feel better, but I also bet your medical bills will go down. I'm like, okay. And, so you think about how many times you go to the physician for doctors, for colds and flus and just other things, other problems that I was having, through the times. I was diagnosed with Meniere's disease, which is a caffeine-related illness. That's why my caffeine story earlier. It's caffeine and sugar really exacerbate that problem. So I started to become aware of diet, and she's been right. I tell you what, we spend a lot of money. It's by far our biggest family bill is on our food. But we are, God willing, we're all very, very healthy, and that's, everybody says diet and exercise, and exercise is important, as you say, movement. But I find out, even in times of lack of movement, the diet gets you through. You still, right. Your immune response is really, really strengthened. So anyway, what is your reaction to that?
Diet, what you eat is, that's what feeds your cells. And diet is definitely more important than exercise. Yes, you have to move your body. I'm not saying it's not important, but you can't not eat well. And right. And this was the thing.
Especially if you're not going to move, right?
No, yeah. Do you remember in, I think it was in the 80s when it was like the pig out workout, but people didn't do well. You can't eat really badly and think you're going to make that up, by exercising like a lunatic. That doesn't work out. There's
Well, like you
injuries.
said, even if you try to eat well, quote unquote, whatever that may be at the time with the trends, but low fat, or high fat or whatever, while you're going through that process, even if you're eating those foods the right way, as you said earlier, you're going to get the toxins, and therefore, if you're not doing detox, you're going to end up getting sick.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. And now, especially with the pandemic, you really want to be eating well. And I think the tendency, and we saw this happening a lot in the beginning, people were going to like their childhood comfort foods, whether they were cookies or chips or ice cream. And now you're in your house. So what happened? A lot of people gained weight. Remember there was the freshman 15, and we had the COVID 15. So, now with people being able, wanting to fit back in their clothes because everybody's been wearing athleisure wear, which, that's just a recipe, for disaster, where you're not getting any feedback from your clothing. But, and we really have to think of what we're eating in terms of health and wellness, and eating a food plan that is anti-inflammatory. So, that's not going to be a food plan that has added sugar. And it may not, depending on how staunch you are, it's usually not going to have gluten. And for some people, it's not going to have grains, but it really depends on the person. And I know there could be people listening who freak out when I say this, because then they're thinking, what do I eat? And that's where people really have to learn. Recently, I decided that everybody in my family, that we were going to be vegan for 4 weeks, which we are not normally vegan. And so it really gave me the chance to up my ante for cooking vegetables. And really everything was fabulous. Nobody missed any of the animal products, but it's a matter of getting into the kitchen. And that's, of course, another thing that happened when we had all these processed foods. I mean, where you live, where I live, we don't ever have to cook. You can go out and get prepared food anywhere. You can get food delivered. I mean, there are people here where I live, I don't know that they've used their ovens. Right. So, you can do that. And I should say sometimes you can get really good food doing that. I mean,
it's harder to find, but where you live, we can find some good spots here.
Well, you live in, the natural food bubble of the United States.
Yeah, we're really lucky here. Yeah.
You have access to to everything. And I do too, but not in the same way. You're in a much smaller community. But, people have a hard time making those kind of decisions. You can walk out of your house, and anywhere you walk, in urban areas, even in non-urban areas, all the gas stations have the convenience stores. What's there to have? That's all processed food.
Mm-hmm.
So
of course it is. Well, what about, our sponsor is a company called Magic Immunity, which is a functional mushroom company. And they feature the reishi mushroom, chaga, lion's mane, and cordyceps, and as well as, I think, 12 other adaptogens, as they call them. Just would love to get your feedback on those types of things, especially functional mushrooms is very intriguing. I mean, mushrooms in general are getting a lot of attention for their, a lot of the psychoactive ones are being utilized now for PTSD and depression and all kinds of things, which is fantastic. But even just from a general nutrition standpoint, mushrooms like reishi and chaga, lion's mane, cordyceps, what do you think about those?
Yeah, I love mushrooms. I think they're such a great product. Excuse me. And they're really great when, I love them when they're actually mixed with CBD. And it's funny that you should bring this up, because right now I've been making a lot of CBD drinks lately. And I made a coconut milk with a mushroom powder and CBD and some turmeric. And I think I made another one with cacao with mushrooms, and they're really, really good. I think when a lot of people hear mushrooms, they freak out. They just think, oh, they're not going to taste good, but the taste is negligible, especially since I'm mixing it, with other products, and they really get the immune benefit is spectacular. And you're talking about adaptogens, what isn't good about regulating, homeostasis, right? You're talking about the endocannabinoid system, where it's balancing, your endocannabinoid system in your body, which is all about balance and homeostasis. I mean, it's literally the basis of cell biology. So I think we're going to see a lot more. I mean, mushrooms, of course, are out there and available. I obviously in Boulder, I'm sure every little place you go into, that serves coffee is also serving a drink, with mushrooms, and we have that here too, some of it. So it's getting, more widespread acceptance, for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up taste, because that was one of the things I was, hypothesizing is it wouldn't taste good. A lot of the mushroom coffees or things like that I've tried have not been real tasty. But the magic immunity was fantastic. And I think it's because they've blended in these other adaptogens, like turmeric and ginger and black pepper and chilies and pomegranate, things that really bring flavor to mushrooms. Don't necessarily taste bad. They just generally are dull in their flavor. Right. And then if you put all this flavor on top of it with other adaptogens, you can really create some nice things. So I'm optimistic about that category. I think it's got a lot of potential.
Yeah, I also think food, manufacturers, and I'm putting, your sponsor into that category, they've gotten a lot more creative about those things. I mean, I can remember the old school, quote unquote, health food store. It had a certain scent to it. Not good, wasn't good. And the food was a little bit too barky,
Right.
So, it gave new meaning to tree hugger. So, but we've come a very, very long way. Even if I look at gluten-free, there were things that years ago were just unpalatable. It just would have been better to eliminate gluten and not try to provide, substitutes. But now that is not the case. There are things that you don't even know that there's that it's a substitute. People have gotten much, much more sophisticated. And,
yeah, we eat a lot of cauliflower crust pizza here because both my son and I are gluten-free. And it's, pizza is the hardest thing to give up for me in that scenario. But it's.
Have you done any cauliflower fried rice?
Oh yeah, my wife. Unfortunately, I'm a very blessed man. She's a great cook, and she's on trend nutritionally. You guys would get along fantastically, and she's a wonderful cook, to the point where it's a curse. Like she's like, oh my God, we can't get anything as good as I can prepare it, and I'm tired of cooking, but I'll cook again, right? And so anyway, she puts that burden on herself quite a bit, but. It's kind of, like I said, I always say the curse of being a great cook as well as a knowledgeable person about nutrition, right? It comes down to then you end up doing it all the time.
It's true.
Yeah. Do you cook?
I do. I do cook. And, it's funny. There are plenty of dietitians and nutritionists who don't cook. But, not only was my love of nutrition born from those radio shows that I heard, but, I lived in what would be a very, I guess, traditional home. I grew up in Brooklyn, and it was a 3-family house, a very big house. My parents lived on the first floor. My Italian grandparents lived on the second floor. And when I was 16, I moved to the top floor. So, and you can imagine both my grandmother and my mother were spectacular cooks. So the kitchen was a big place to stay. And of course, in those kind of kitchens, food is love. And I can remember going to people's houses, and if they didn't offer me food, it was like, well, how can I even be friends with those people? I didn't even understand it. But it was, so that was also a big thing. So there was a lot of cooking and a lot of activity going on around the dinner table. I mean, at that time, that was not at the time when, the father, my father and most dads I knew were home for dinner. They weren't working,
Right.
60, 70, 80 hours a week. They're working 40 hours a week. So dinner was, an activity, and the dinner was being cooked and you sat around and ate dinner and there was discussion. And, I think that I know intellectually people know that that is a really important time, whether it's breakfast in the morning or dinner in the evening or both. But, you have to make a commitment to that. But I think, interestingly, that is happening now during COVID,
Mm-hmm.
because what else are you going to do? You're there, remember, the whole sourdough thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I perfected, my vegetable cooking. People, now people are taking the time. You're home. You're not rushing as much.
My wife made a gluten-free pizza crust last night. Just fantastic, but it was a disaster in terms of how much difficulty it put her through to get to that point. Right. So it's like, it was an interesting dinner, but it was so good. It was so fantastic, but we had time to do that because COVID, right? You're always at home. What else are you going to do?
Absolutely.
Well, tell us about your book, the CBD Oil Miracle. Like, I'm assuming that came out of your experience with your daughter, but
well, yeah, the publisher, St. Martin's Press, approached me to write the book, and the first part of the book really lays the groundwork about the endocannabinoid system, about the cannabis plant. And one of the big things that I like to talk about is the word psychoactivity, that it's not a bad thing. And CBD would not work for anxiety if it weren't psychoactive. I think, unfortunately, a lot of the CBD hemp manufacturers market their products by saying it's not psychoactive because they want to separate it from THC, as if THC is a bad thing. And
right.
THC is not a bad thing. I don't believe in throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There are many people who benefit from THC. So even though pain is one of the things that people use hemp-derived CBD for, it can also be used if you have really severe pain, you're going to need the THC. And then, so I talk about that a lot. And then in the second part of the book, there's different conditions, and I indicate whether or not the condition, whether CBD might be appropriate for the condition or not, because sometimes it's not. Or if maybe you have to look into, medical marijuana, but maybe CBD isn't enough. So it's an overview. I mean, it's a consumer oriented book because, first and foremost, I see myself as an educator and communicator. That's even how my program started, the Holistic Cannabis Academy, which is at holisticcanna.com. It was really about, I learned all of these things from my daughter, and I had to learn it on my own. I didn't have anybody, there was no practitioner I could go to. I didn't know where to go. So I realized, well, nobody knows anything. So maybe this is a good opportunity then, to be able to teach people. But for me, it was about what you and I were talking about earlier. I don't want people just to take, the magic pill or whatever. They have to change their other lifestyle behaviors, especially what they're eating. And, there's all the, as we were saying, you're talking about meditation and tapping. A lot of people don't know what tapping is, but you can download a tapping app. The one I used is called, I think it's called the Tapping Solution. And tapping really changes your breath. And when you change your breath, you're changing everything. You are then impacting your endocannabinoid system, because most people are breathing up here. They're breathing too high, and they're too shallow. And most of us do that, and then you can tap or do some knitting or some other meditative activity, and that will really help, your breathing. So, integrating breathing with nutrition and cannabis and, mushrooms and, yoga. There's so many different things. All of that is personalized lifestyle medicine.
I love it. So, What is all of this underpinning your Holistic Cannabis Academy then, in terms of what you're doing online with education?
Yes. So there's 31 modules, and there's a lot of, you got to lay the groundwork because people don't know what the endocannabinoid system is. They may not understand the plant, but so then it also talks about integrating cannabis with other modalities, whether it's with, as I said, nutrition, meditation, breath work, yoga. You're going to get better results when you do that. So it's like, if you think about somebody who has diabetes, and you and I both know people like this, I'm sure, and they eat whatever they want and then they take more insulin.
Right.
That's not really the idea. And there's going to be negative sequelae down the road. You can't be robbing from Peter to pay Paul. You really have to make this a holistic venture.
What one of the things it perplexes me is people don't want to believe, in my experience, and I'm I say most people, certainly some do, but most people don't want to take the responsibility for knowing that their diet choices are as important as they are. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. It seems so obvious to you and I as we're talking about this, but in my experience, I talk to folks, and even in my own family, and you talk about organic food choices, and people almost feel like you're being an elitist or something, and it's like I'm not. That's not the point. The point is, like, this is the right food for your body. Like it's, and I don't know. Most people just don't want to have that conversation.
Yes, I will never be out of business. It is that is a problem, and a lot of people don't take action until something bad happens to them,
right?
And then maybe they take action, or maybe not. I think part of that is one. I think it's because the processed foods are plentiful. They're plentiful. And everywhere, as I said, you go to a gas station.
They must be safe. They're approved, right? They must be safe.
Yeah. They are everywhere. They're easy to access. They're easy to eat. They're portable. So they're tasty, because once you have that sugar craving, they're going to be tasty. So they check all those boxes. The other thing that I think is a big part of it is that our agency for our own self-care was taken away from us. So, I don't know how many years ago, I think fewer than 100. It's not, I know that seems like a long time, but maybe 80 years ago, we had agency for food choice, and not only for food choice, but also self-care. You weren't going to the doctor for a prescription. These medications didn't exist. Right. So you had a home pharmacy, and that home pharmacy 80 years ago had cannabis in it, and it had a lot of herbs in it, and people knew what to put together. If you go to any these people exist now. If you find any nonas or any, especially in Chinese medicine, there's plenty of things that look like sticks and leaves. It's alive and well, traditional Chinese medicine, ancient medicines, Indian medicine, these exist, but that was taken away from us and sort of replaced by, modern medicine, that you had to go to somebody. So people have lost their own agency to say, wait a minute, I can fix myself. I think of how people run to the doctor for any little ache or pain, and they usually don't need to go. A fever is your body's way of healing and saying something is wrong. So what do? You stay home, you drink a lot of water, you rest. You definitely have some chicken soup that's been cooked with bones, some bone broth, right. and you get better. we're not talking about, things where you do have to, go to the doctor because it's a life or death situation. Or, if you have a broken bone, obviously, yes. But I think that has been taken away from us. So I do think it's a combination of things. I mean, I can tell you from my own experience with my daughter, even though here I was, I felt like Dorothy. I had those red shoes, but I didn't know what the power of them was.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted somebody else to take care of her because I didn't know, I wasn't recognizing my own ability, not just as a dietitian who was, and at that point I wasn't trained in functional medicine, but also as a mother. If I'm sure a lot of the stories about moms with children on the spectrum or children with very devastating health issues. Most of the time it's the mother who heals the child because
Yeah.
these women are powerful.
Yeah, I met a lot of them when I was at Charlotte's Web. There was a lot of amazing women.
And these women have they have agency.
Mm-hmm.
They have taken control and said, you know what, I can't rely on the current system.
Yeah. So how is your daughter today? What is her life like?
She's great. So her name is Isabella, and her middle name is actually my mother's maiden name, which is Speranza, which that's not Esperanza, it's just Speranza, which means hope in Italian. So quite coincidentally,
Nice.
We named her Beautiful Hope, and she's doing very well. She's aged out of the educational system, which is a scary thing. And for any of your listeners who have children with special needs, you know that in most states they get services up until they're 21. And then after 21, it's like falling off a cliff. Then they have to qualify for services. And it's very complicated how they get the services. But nevertheless, she was going to a program 2 days a week because how else would she meet people? Mm-hmm. And now, of course, that's all on Zoom, which I have to say, she doesn't always want to do it, but then when she's there, she likes it. She works at a supermarket 2 mornings a week. And before she was working 4 days a week, but it just seemed like we didn't want her to be there as much during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. She does horseback riding and equine therapy, and the horseback riding is fantastic for her.
Wow, those are majestic animals.
Oh, it's amazing. And I didn't know about equine therapy, but horses sense things right away, mm-hmm. and they sense it, and then it's done. They don't linger like humans do. So talk therapy wasn't really going to work for her without having the horse there. And right. It's amazing. I have participated, and I have to tell you, if anybody has the opportunity to experience that or to watch that in action, it's pretty phenomenal. So she's doing great. And then she has a couple of other groups that she participates with online. I mean, she tells me almost every day, I want this COVID to be over. And I said, yes, yeah, I'm with her. Do I.
Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear there's a lot of positivity and hope there. So that's great, and beautiful hope, that, as you said, right?
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, Laura, thank you. I think that's about as much time as we have today. So thank you so much. It was really a pleasure talking to you, and I couldn't be of more like mind with you in a lot of ways with regards to what you're talking about and what you're trying to help bring forward. So let's definitely stay in touch. I would love to, again, continue the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Well, have a great afternoon. Thank you.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to today's show. Always brought to you by Magic Immuna Tea, available at packedwithlife.com. A mushroom tea that tastes great. Try it. Magic Immuna Tea, packedwithlife.com.